Welcome to the Invite Health podcast, where our degreed healthcare professionals are excited to offer you the most important health and wellness information you need to make informed choices about your health. You can learn more about the products discussed in each of these episodes and all that Invite Health has to offer at www.invitehealth.com/podcast. First-time customers can use promo code podcast at checkout for an additional 15% off your first purchase. Let's get started.
There's been amazing discoveries about our brain. One of them goes back to over 100 years ago. And these clearly affect ongoing good memory functions. But now there's been further discoveries on how we can improve these functions of the brain and ensure a better functioning memory, hopefully deep into old age, and become super agers. For instance, the glymphatic system. It's literally how the brain detoxifies itself. It was discovered about 1985. It got its mother name in 2012. But recently, it's been discovered that we can actually improve glymphatic activity, which is very important because the ability to detoxify your brain does decline with age. And we're not quite sure where in your lifespan it starts to fail us. A second major discovery in the 1980s was that we release something at night called brain-derived neurotrophic factor, and this is really important because we now know that it seeds the brain with new memory cells, healthy, young, well-functioning memory cells. That was the ability to improve this, though, has just been discovered over the past 10 years. It's through the use of an herb. Lastly, the blood-brain barrier, a barrier that protects your brain from toxins and things that do not belong in the brain, was discovered over 100 years ago. That's very interesting. But the possibility of repairing it has only been discovered recently with a polyphenol that comes out of plants. So hi, my name is Jerry Hickey. I'm a nutritional pharmacist. I'm also the senior scientific officer over here at Invite Health. Welcome to my episode, Recent Discoveries in Nutrition That Affect Your Memory. Please subscribe to our podcast and please leave us a review. You can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Invite Health. All of the information on today's episode will be linked in the episode description, and you can visit invitehealth.com/podcast for more information. So let's get going. So there's been major discoveries on how to protect your brain and even improve your brain over the recent past. I mean, not very long ago. And over the course of this episode, I will discuss ways of bringing back these important brain functions. So let's first talk about the glymphatic system. The glymphatic system was discovered about 1985. It was named the glymphatic system in 2012. But not until very long ago, we didn't know how to improve the glymphatic system. It slows down with age, and I can't pinpoint when it starts to slow down, but it's not a good thing because the glymphatic system literally is the way that the brain washes itself. For instance, there was a study mostly out of Georgetown University Medical Center, but also out of the Mayo Clinic and the Cleveland Clinic and a whole bunch of great academic research institutions working in congruence throughout the country. And they were looking at patients with Alzheimer's disease. And they noted a number of things during the study. One, there really seems to be a period of inflammation that causes swelling of the brain. As the brain swells, it becomes harder to rinse toxins out of the brain. This is called glymphatic activity. And when this happens, toxins build up and they destroy brain cells and the nerve tissue in the brain. This is a major pathology that takes place in Alzheimer's. They also found that resveratrol may be beneficial in reversing this to some degree. However, studies also show that fish oils help. In fact, we know of 4 natural things at this point that do help restore glymphatic activity. A well-absorbed turmeric, the plant that supplies curcumin and other valuable constituents. Fish oils, green tea, and resveratrol. So what happened in the study of Alzheimer's patients when the research centers gave people with Alzheimer's high doses of synthetic resveratrol, which is an important point. You may need a lot less of the natural resveratrol to get this done, especially if it's in conjunction with quercetin and grapeseed, which really seem to amplify the benefits of the resveratrol. What they found with the resveratrol was that it was reducing inflammation in the brain. As the inflammation in the brain declined, glymphatic activity was restored, and the brain was once again to remove toxins, and the brains of these poor, unfortunate people with Alzheimer's was functioning better. So what exactly is the glymphatic system? Your brain is surrounded by cerebral spinal fluid. This fluid is very important because it insulates the brain from getting knocked around to a degree as much as you can, but it also feeds the brain. And at night, it changes in character, and it's allowed to enter the brain, and it removes that day's buildup of plaques and toxins. Well, they're not really plaques yet. It's beta amyloid. Beta amyloid is used in the brain. Scientists don't fully understand what it's used for, but it is used specifically for different things. They believe it might have some structural activity in the brain. It's needed to keep structures together, but they also believe that it's part of the brain's immune system. And they think that one of the reasons beta amyloid builds up in the brain in people with Alzheimer's is there's some kind of infection going on in some of these people. But that's still to be unraveled and proven one way or the other. There are a number of researchers, and this is going back decades, who believe that infectious organisms are somehow driving Alzheimer's disease. But let's get back to the glymphatic system. So at night, when you go into deep sleep, non-REM sleep, it's called delta wave sleep, the way your cerebral spinal fluid functions changes in character, and it rinses through the brain, and it removes that day's buildup, that day's accrual of beta amyloid. Otherwise, if you don't do that thoroughly, the beta amyloid starts to build up, and it kind of joins together in a spool called an oligomer, and this becomes very toxic to the brain, and it starts to really inflame the brain and starts to damage the nerve tissue, and you get the tauopathies, which is kind of like the end result of Alzheimer's when the brain is really destroyed. So they discovered through that study led by Georgetown that resveratrol helps restore glymphatic activity in the brain by reducing inflammation, but this was more in people with brain disease. So what about the general public? Well, there's a number of studies now that fish oils, especially krill oil, help the glymphatic system. Because krill oil, besides the fish oils, also has phospholipids like phosphatidylcholine, phosphatidylserine, phosphatidylethanolamine, and phosphatidylinositol, although the dominant phosphatide in krill oil is phosphatidylcholine, which is great for memory anyway. But it really seems to support the glymphatic system. So I tell my clients, you're older now. We know that at some point, glymphatic activity, I explain to them what that is. It's detoxifying the brain, that it slows down with age. We don't know at what point, and we don't know the difference from person to person, so it's just a good idea. It's good practice to have some krill oil every day. So every day I take 2 krill oil with my breakfast. I practice what I preach. Now, the next discovery is a little different. It's not about detoxifying the brain. It's about rebuilding the brain. In the 1980s, they discovered a nerve growth factor released in the brain called brain-derived neurotrophic factor. And it's really important. You also release it at night when you're sleeping, showing how important sleep is for the brain. And the brain-derived neurotrophic factor triggers the formation of new memory cells. Now, we've only learned in the past 10 years that young people literally release enough brain-derived neurotrophic factor when they go into deep sleep to replace 600 or 700 memory cells. Because you lost memory cells the day before, you have to replace them that night. So that might not sound like a lot, but over the course of your first 50 years of life, you literally have replaced every single memory cell with brand new memory cells. But the release of brain-derived neurotrophic factor declines with age. Now, they did find in some people, like people with metabolic syndrome, where they tend to have a big belly and their blood sugar is going up and their blood pressure is going up, that zinc in those people seems to help restore the release of brain-derived neurotrophic factor. But across the entire population, a well-absorbed curcumin helps restore brain-derived neurotrophic factor. So on one hand, we previously described the detoxification pathway to brain, the glymphatic system, where a well-absorbed turmeric can help support that too. Now we're talking about literally recreating memory cells. So today, in the daytime, you're going to lose some memory cells. At night, you're supposed to replace them. Your ability to do that declines with age. There's at least 5 human clinical trials. When you give people a well-absorbed curcumin, that's why I take 2 biocurcumin every evening with my dinner, you once again are releasing more brain-derived neurotrophic factor than other people in your age group in your 60s, 70s, and 80s, and you're going to replace more lost memory cells. And this is important because it's called cognitive reserve. That means that you have brand new memory cells that have not been tainted with depression or the kind of plaque you see in Alzheimer's. And that cognitive reserve, those extra brain cells, can go on functioning well into deep old age. So you still have a working memory. That's really cool. So I take 2 krill oil with my breakfast to help my brain detoxify, because the krill, the oils and the phosphatides get into the brain and they exist for a long time, more than one day. But at night with my dinner, I take biocurcumin 5-loxin, which does a whole bunch of things for my brain, but what I'm really aiming at is the release of brain-derived neurotrophic factor so I could seed my brain with new memory cells. The last thing I'm going to discuss is the blood-brain barrier. We learned about this in pharmacy school in the 1970s. They used the same dye in lab animals. They injected them with a dye, aniline dye. That's what you dye blue jeans with. That's the blue dye. And the researchers, this is going way back. This is going back like over 100 years. They found that the dye did not get into the brain. There was something blocking it. And they found out that there was extra insulation in the blood vessels in the brain called the blood-brain barrier that keeps things from the bloodstream from leaving and entering the brain if they're dangerous for the brain. Now, it's not perfect. Obviously, alcohol gets into the brain and marijuana gets into the brain, so it's not perfect. But in general, it keeps really nasty things out of the brain. It turns out that the blood-brain barrier decays with age. So there's tight junctions between the cells that line the blood vessels in the brain and extra insulation, mostly made out of collagen. And this keeps things out of the brain. But as you grow older, for many reasons, you start to get gaps in the junctions, and things can now leave the blood and get into the brain that don't belong there, and this contributes to brain inflammation. In fact, it might be part and parcel of Alzheimer's disease. They've discovered over the past, not very long, past 5 years or so, that resveratrol also helps heal your blood-brain barrier. So besides helping the glymphatic system detoxify, resveratrol also helps heal the blood-brain barrier to keep nasty things out of the brain. So these are things I do every day for ongoing good brain health. I'm a 67-year-old guy. But when would I start them? In my mid-50s, when things start to slip and slide for sure. So I take the krill oil, 2 capsules with breakfast for my glymphatic system, but it does a lot more than that for the brain. It also restores the formation of acetylcholine, which you need for your memory. I take the biocurcumin 5-loxin with my dinner so I can release brain-derived neurotrophic factor when I'm sleeping to create new memory cells. And I take a resveratrol 200 milligram every day. It's been shown to be great for circulation in the brain and metabolism in the brain, but it's been also shown through research such as from Georgetown University to help heal the blood-brain barrier. So that is like really core stuff for ongoing good brain health. You know, that's on top of getting your sleep and getting your exercise and drinking your raw water and eating your vegetables, et cetera, and getting enough protein. All these things are important for the brain. So thank you for tuning into the Invite Health Podcast. You can find all of our episodes for free wherever you listen to podcasts, or visit invitehealth.com/podcast. Please subscribe and please leave a review. You can also follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Invite Health. I hope to see you next time on another episode of the Invite Health Podcast, and thanks so much for listening.